Greetings, friends. We have a Tim Kirby Russia here, a little bit of an emergency live stream that you're probably watching already recorded. But anyways, on here on Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore, which you can find on Telegram, I posted a few posts that are basically like small articles related to one sort of, let's just put it this way, fairly tragic event, as one of our guests has been unfortunately arrested. This arrest happened a while ago. I found out about this actually also a bit of a while ago, but I kind of sat on the information because I didn't quite know what to do with it, and my health has been failing me near the end of the year. But anyways, it's one of these things where sometimes I put off topics too long because I kind of wait for the right moment, and I don't think the right moment is ever going to come. So we're going to talk about that today, and then in a later video, again, if you're watching this recorded, we'll talk about a different topic, and then we will get to calls. So anyways, journalist Nazaket Mamedova, who was on our program, she came on a while ago. This was right during the really hot, active phase of the war in Nagorno-Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This, unfortunately, always much treasured, often fought for sort of big valley, flared up yet again. And as we've seen in Armenia, ever since the sort of kind of soft color revolution rise of Pashinyan to power, Armenia just gets weaker and weaker and weaker, and they may have gotten to the breaking point, shall we say. And so, anyways, and so she came on to talk about that. We're not talking about Pashinyan today. We're going to talk about her. And unfortunately, due to the sort of mutual friends that we have, remember, I get a lot of tips on information and guests and all this stuff. And from our mutual friends, they told me that Nazaket has been arrested, and the exact charges, as you see in my little article post here, espionage and high treason. This is in relation to covering the war in Ukraine from a supposedly pro-Russian standpoint. So on this program, we've had some whistleblowers and people who've been in trouble in the past, but have sort of gotten their freedom later. This is, I think, the first time in the history of this program that one of our guests has been locked up for very dubious reasons. So this is an unfortunate new trend, but what can I say? But the first thing I can say about it is that it's very weird that whether someone were to cover the Ukrainian war from a super repeating Kremlin talking point standpoint or a BBC talking point standpoint, the big question is, how does that affect Azerbaijan? Especially because Nazaket had, I don't know how she would feel currently, but had nothing but good things to say about the current powers that be in Azerbaijan, which also makes this even weirder. As someone who is mostly for the system, but I guess the system, for something about this Ukrainian war, must be very special, which kind of ties into the second thing I want to say about that, is that we also have to remember that it looks like a lot of people who aren't the locals are pulling the strings in the South Caucasus. Because I point out in my second article here, again, this is a little confusing, guys, it's all going to come together later, give me a little break, that I was able to find that according to the Times of Israel, Israel had been pumping through about almost 100 cargo planes worth of weapons and equipment to Azerbaijan. And interestingly, the Times of Israel just basically came out and said that they quietly helped Azerbaijan retake Nagorno-Karabakh, which is pretty crazy to have that in a major publication and just be that blunt about it. So that's not a conspiracy. So they helped them on that, and also the leader of Azerbaijan has met with the defense minister of Israel, of course, before this whole crisis in Israel started in October, but that's kind of telling. But again, the sort of tie-in factor then is that, okay, we also have to remember that really, because of the war in Ukraine, Israel in a lot of ways sacrificed having good relations with Russia, which is hard for people to believe. Because contrary to what you've read in the alt media, until the war in Ukraine started, for the most part, Moscow and Tel Aviv have had generally really productive relations, pretty good neutral relations, at least on the surface, or pretty deep beyond the surface. But when the war in Ukraine started, all of a sudden, Israel definitely sent a lot of, trainers and other forms of help to Ukraine. They clearly sort of picked a side in that conflict. So, kind of between these two articles, one that I wrote about Nazaket herself being arrested and how that's absurd, because what can one journalist do, especially a journalist that doesn't have like a lot of backing or doesn't have some sort of like amazing, crazy whistleblower information, just someone that's kind of covering the war against, covering what seems to be a foreign war against what the powers that be want, doesn't really add up. But if you look into the context of maybe Israel is somehow bought a wedge into the Caucasus Mountains via Azerbaijan and to a great extent probably the whole thing, probably via Georgia and Armenia all at the same time. But they've sort of bought their way into the region, at least provably into one of these major nations, to drive a wedge between Iran and Russia, as my friends have told me. I'm not so sure if that's true, guys. I'm not really sure if that's kind of the end game. But I can tell you that it then makes, when you think about it, we're kind of philosophizing together. Feel free to comment. Remember, if you comment basically anywhere on Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore, I'll see it. Here, in fact, I'll do a little post right now. If you want to comment on the live stream, you can do it right here. Okay, so there you go. So if you want to comment, you can comment there. I'll get to a bit later. But as you can kind of see that this is coming together, that maybe the reason why some journalist covering a foreign conflict becomes such a big problem, because maybe there's a lot of Israeli influence. So maybe it's not necessarily Azerbaijan's own status quo that's so angry about this, but perhaps it's connected to Israel. And her arrest did come after the October 7th uprising, attacks, terror attack, depending how you want to look at it. That's up to you. Now, this comes in connection with someone who won't want me to mention their name, but has repeatedly been like telling me that unfortunately, deep inside, like, your real halls of power within the United States, that unfortunately they really, really believe that deep down, everything that's happening related to this whole Hamas versus the Israeli Defense Forces or Hezbollah or whoever, that the Russians are behind it. And this person knows what they're talking about. And it's just like, man, this just can't get any worse. So I could see that if we're going to, again, go into like sort of conspiracy theory realm, if for baffling reasons, the Washington establishment and the Israeli establishment somehow really believe that Russia's behind the rise of Hamas, okay, then I could see that if they have a high degree of control over the political establishment of some other region, per se, then maybe they might want to shut people up who are pro-Russian. But that's, again, that's really loose. That's really loose. That's very weird. I don't know why they arrested this woman who came on our program. I just don't see what it accomplishes. I even mentioned in my little article here that, to be honest, usually they could have just told her, you like Russia so much? Then live there. You're exiled. You're done. Either they, because in a lot of countries they can actually renounce your citizenship. Not in America. That's one freedom we still have. They can renounce it. In Russia, it's kind of weird. They can only sort of renounce it if you become naturalized as an adult and then do something treasonous. But anyways, yeah, so it just seems like, why not just exile her? Why this whole big deal with arresting this person? And again, my friends who tipped me off to this, who I'll put this way, are very, they believe one side of the story. They say she's been tortured. Again, I don't know. I relayed what they put in the article, but again, that's one of those things where it's kind of like the day the chick, she comes out of prison, let's hope, God willing, she comes out of prison at some point. Well, they'll be able to tell. Either she was tortured or she wasn't. The scars and damage will be there, so I don't know. But this is just a really ugly. Oh, thank goodness I'm recording. I thought I was recording. I don't know. My brain is really in a bad shape here. I'm pretty sick before the holidays, but I really wanted to get these last few videos done. I try to keep a nice schedule. But anyways, I just think that this whole situation is very weird. It is sort of interesting that for the most part, the entire south of the Caucasus, be it Armenia, be it Georgia, be it Azerbaijan now, are completely united on the side of Kiev. That's something interesting. Some would say, and my friends seem to believe, excuse me, that they are united more so on the side of Israel, and Israel really likes Kiev. Okay, we've talked about that kind of topic before. But that's sort of where we're at, and that what happens is if the South Caucasus despise Russia, then that does create a nice physical wedge between Russia and Iran. However, my gut feeling is more that, like, partially to some extent, I think the Turks are always going to be at play with what's happening in Azerbaijan because the language differences between them are very minor, much like between Russian and Ukrainian. And their cultural connections are very large, and I think that it's probably also working in Turkey's best interest to maybe make Turkey great again. So I think that there's probably that happening in the background. But again, why arrest one journalist who might happen to be pro-Russian over this, who is never anti-systemic? It just doesn't make sense. So in some ways, guys, I'm actually kind of here to ask for maybe your help, because the overall motivations, there's things happening here. You can see that there's moves. There's some reason why this person was arrested, but it doesn't really paint a clear, logical picture. That I just don't understand. So anyways, guys, you can fill me in the comments, or if you have some really good ideas, you can talk to me directly. This is part 1 of today's live streams is over. We're going to get to part 2 coming very soon.